to welcome you to the Clinic Information Night. This is done a little bit differently. Typically, we have this together with the clinics and the internships, and we really wanted to highlight the great work that is being done in our clinics and with our course conveners. And so I'm really excited that we have our course conveners here. My name is Rebecca Rivera. I'm part of the Career and Employability team, along with Saskia Holbourn in the back. And then Nicholas Silvestri and Tim Hillman, who will be here later, will be joining us also from this team. And we're really excited to tell you about the clinic opportunities that are available to our Bachelor's of Laws and Juris Doctor students. And after the presentations by our course conveners, we're going to hear from a former clinic participant and review the eligibility. Also have an opportunity for some Q&A. Okay, so at this time, I would like to invite Professor Vivien Holmes for the acknowledgement of country and to discuss the community law clinic.
Thanks, Rebecca. So I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Aboriginal land and pay my respects and our respects to the traditional owners of the land. I acknowledge that the land was never ceded and always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I'm convening Canberra Community Law Clinic, and I've actually come from a day of talking to students who are doing the clinic this semester, because at week 6 we have an interview with the convener, the principal lawyer at CCL, and the student and their supervisor. So Canberra Community Law, you may have heard of, but if not, you can look up the website. It's a long-standing community law clinic in Canberra, and it works with some of the people experiencing the most disadvantaged in the Canberra community. It has a number of programs, so discrimination law program, does a lot of housing work for people experiencing homelessness, looking for a home, but also people in public housing whose home hasn't been repaired properly, and you'll be staggered to find out what percentage of public housing tenants that is. And has a duty lawyer at ACAT, so the Civil and Administrative Tribunal. So lots of exciting things going on. And so what happens is that students put a preference for a program and a day, and they get allocated to work alongside a supervising solicitor. So you'll be involved in client interviews, doing file notes of those interviews, doing some research on a client matter so you can advise and draft the advice for the client, go down to ACAT and see what happens before the tribunal, take notes of the hearing, which is always a busy and exciting day. That's always happening on a Thursday. But even students whose on-site day is not Thursday get a chance to go along to ACAT. As I said before, the Community Law Centre works with clients experiencing significant disadvantage. And so what students are confronted with is not only the disadvantage, but how that disadvantage can snowball and how legal issues can snowball. Like you get one legal problem and then there's often a myriad of legal problems that come out from that. And also what students get to see is what difference it makes to have a lawyer either just give advice and put people on the right track or actually take on being an advocate for those clients. So all the students that I've dealt with in this course over quite a few semesters now have always found it very enriching, giving them a great insight into community law, but also just how law works on the ground with real people. And I think that'll be true of all the clinics actually, but that's one of the benefits of doing clinic. What else can I tell you about it? There's also a street law program, so that's outreach to people experiencing homelessness. So the lawyers actually go out into the community to the early morning centre or McKillop House or places like that where people will just come and have a chat. They also do community legal education. So one of the street law solicitors was at the early morning centre, I think it was today, talking about how do you know if you've got a legal problem, for example, and suggesting that people, not just sign something if they don't know what it is, but come along and see CCL lawyer. So yeah, it's a great community legal centre, and being part of it is a great experience, and a lot of students actually keep going back to volunteer as once they become solicitors, which says a lot about how well the centre is run, and the sort of meaning of doing that sort of work. So Sarouche is now going to talk about the prison literacy clinic.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarouche Razi. I'm a lawyer and I teach here at ANU as well. I've practiced mostly with Aboriginal Legal Services and community legal centres, and now I work for New South Wales Legal Assistance Forum. The clinic I run takes students to the Alexander McConaughey Centre. So it's the primary detention facility in the ACT, and it's a program that's been running for more than a decade at ANU, originally as a volunteer program, and now it's been a clinic for a number of years now as well. It's a really powerful clinic to be involved with, because most people don't have an experience with detention or prison, but most of you have studied law for 3 or 4 years. And prison is kind of the other side of that. It's the side of punishment. It tells a lot about our society and the values underneath it. The way the clinic operates is that we go and offer legal education sessions, and we offer those sessions the way that the detainees want inside of the prison. So we do 6 sessions and they run for an hour, but it's kind of the first half of semester. And we go on a Friday, we consult with the detainees about what they want sessions on. And the subjects could be as varied as wanting to know more about bail and sentencing, to human rights matters, to sometimes we've even had people wanting to know about the Constitution. And it's really a challenging environment. We get placed in different units every semester. So we could be inside the women's unit, the men's unit, or the disability unit as well. And so I'm really hoping to get students constantly thinking about what the power of education is, and how to measure the difference between working with people who have lived experience of law that you hopefully will never have, but knowing that you have skills that you can go away, research, come back and offer something of value to the detainees. And so, yeah, it's a really powerful kind of space. What we do is, what I really hope is to get people who have a passion for kind of education is really important to me, but also an interest in engaging with people who have difficult life experiences. I suppose the last thing is just taking a step back and thinking what you might get out of it is really thinking about, you've gone through your kind of law degree and you haven't, I wonder if you've really thought about our system of punishment. So it's a really profound experience walking into a prison. It's very hard for it not to change your life and the way you see things once you've walked into a prison environment. And I'm really looking for people who are kind of compassionate and willing to learn, and willing, most importantly, you're relying on 5 other people. So it's always 6 people a semester. And so it's really thinking about what it means to teach in a team and to kind of operate in that way, because you're supporting each other in what is a very challenging environment. And yeah, so that's kind of the main takeaways. The second half of the course and the second part of the assessment, what I offer is to give students policy experience. So I generally connect with the Aboriginal Legal Service or a community legal centre, and you prepare submissions that will go into some of their policy work. So this semester, we're looking at bail and bail reform inside of Aboriginal Legal Services, particularly the ALS of New South Wales. And the students will make submissions really being informed about, you know, plain language law, legal education and lived experience that they've had in that first part of the semester. So that's a bit about my clinic. I'm apologising for having to leave in advance. I've got childcare pickup, but I'll pass on to Michael.
Thanks very much, Sarouche. The Youth Law Clinic links up with the Youth Law Centre in Legal Aid over the road opposite the Street Theatre. If you're in the Youth Law Clinic, you'll be one of 5 people coming in on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday, and you'll be dealing with 4 clients. They're generally aged between 12 and 25. They generally have problems with ACT laws. There's occasional federal law, but it's generally ACT. The law is generally law that you don't study at ANU. It's landlord and tenant and that type of thing. Effectively, you come in at 9 o'clock, have a look at what matters are on for the day. At 9:30, there's a meeting. There are 3 lawyers and there are 5 students, and the 8 of us sit around the table, look at what we know about the 4 clients we're going to see that day. The students go in 2 at a time and interview 1 client. They then come and talk to one of the lawyers and find out what the legal advice that person needs, and they go back and pass that advice on. There can be follow-up questions, which might mean that the lawyer does go in and talk to them, but generally they're dealt with by the student, but the student receives all the legal advice to pass on from a lawyer. They can give legal information, but they can't give advice. That's got to come from someone that's a qualified lawyer. It's backed up with a course called Youth Law Clinic at ANU, which I run, and which manifests itself in some assessments. There are two written assignments. The work they do in the Youth Law Centre is assessed, as are contributions in seminars. And every Friday there's a 2-hour seminar on an issue to do with youth that come before the Youth Law Centre. And there's areas that deal with things like homelessness, family problems, juvenile detention, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the age of criminal responsibility has been 10, but it's moved up to 12 now in the ACT, on its way to being 14. The students are very enthusiastic about it. They find that they get a whole aspect of legal study that they don't get at ANU. Good as ANU is, they don't get the practical depth that they get in the Youth Law Centre. And they also are very generous in their assessments of the seminars. Should I finish? No, I've got 1 more minute. Well, okay. The sorts of student that might do this, someone who's interested in legal practice, particularly finding out how a law office works, how you draft a legal letter, how you take notes after you've seen a client, and so on. So those are the sorts of things that will be attractive. People also with an interest in how young people are affected by the law, juvenile detention, how that works and what it does to people, homelessness, problems with parents, being exposed to violence, all these sorts of things are very much discussed in the seminars, but also we find that with the clients. The other great thing, the gift that we give students and students give to the clients is the clients come into the office, they have problems and they generally feel happier when they leave. And that peps up the student and it also peps up the person that's been to see them. So I think that's probably it for me. Oh, and I'm going to pass now on to Stephanie. We worked together a few years ago at Legal Aid, and Stephanie is going to talk to you about the environmental law clinic.
Thank you, Michael. It's very hard to not be competitive in this situation because I hear about all these excellent clinics and then I think, yes, but the environmental law clinic is exciting for this reason. So my name is Steph. I have been an environmental lawyer in the past. I don't currently hold a practicing certificate, but I work as a legal coordinator for an organisation called Lock the Gate that works with landholders and First Nations people that are against coal and gas mining. I used to be an EDO lawyer and I used to run the EDO clinic when I was running the ACT office. The organisation has now merged into a national organisation, which means that this is actually a remote clinic. So if you are part of the environmental law clinic, you'll be working from the comfort of your home in your UGG boots, which is a good selling point. One of the other advantages of that is that you are being supervised by lawyers around the country. So you're not working on ACT issues. unless you're partnered with a supervisor from the ACT. You could be working with the Northern Territory lawyer on fracking issues, or you could be working with a New South Wales lawyer on corporate accountability, or you could be working with a lawyer in Queensland on water issues. It's really quite vast. And that's one of the advantages of the clinic. The seminars that we run each week on Fridays are on a range of different issues. So we look at issues such as planning, such as forestry, water, climate change, obviously, biodiversity. But in addition to that, we look at it from different perspectives as well. So we do have guest lecturers coming from the Department of the Environment, from private practice. I give some. We have people coming from Environmental Justice Australia and EDO running these sessions. In addition to that, we have, in fact, this last week, we had the president of the ACT Civil and Administrative Tribunal talk about merits review in the ACT, which was quite exciting. But we start off this semester really embedding the clinic in First Nations perspectives. So we have a cultural tour, generally on Mount Majura, where students get to go out and listen firsthand to a traditional custodian in the ACT about the ACT landscape. So that's pretty exciting. One of the things that we focus on, I guess, in the clinic as well is not just about, how to be an environmental lawyer, but how to be an environmental advocate. So another one of our guest speakers is generally a former client of the EDO who talks about what it's like to be a client on the other side. Your assessment will comprise of course, your clinic work, but also a personal reflection, because it's important to reflect in your practice as a lawyer or a law student. But in addition to that, a law reform submission of a topic of your choice. So really trying to harness and develop your skills around legal advocacy as well. There's always something new and a topic that underpins each semester. So last semester, there was lots of information out there about new environmental Commonwealth laws that were being negotiated, and that underpinned, discussions last semester. This semester, it's looking like the topic we're talking about and touching on most weeks is the current SLAP action against the EDO. And SLAP stands for Strategic Litigation Against Public Participation. And if any of you have been reading the news, you'll see that Santos is really drilling down, that's a terrible pun. Pursuing, thank you, much better. Pursuing the EDO for costs in a matter that they lost earlier this year. So it's really interesting and topical for that reason as well. I guess in your clinic, you can expect to develop your skills around file noting, writing research memos, helping to prepare bits and pieces of litigation, and developing legal educational materials. You're a good fit if you like working in your UGG boots. You're driven, can work independently, and of course you're interested in the environment. Also, I wanted to note, as we've mentioned, a number of our students also continue volunteering with the EDO after the clinic ends. So if you have and are driven by that topic, it's likely that you'll be able to continue with your experience. How am I going? Okay, I'm actually done, but obviously you can tell that the EDO clinic is a hoot. So we would really encourage you to sign up. This is Jonathan, who will talk about the International Law and Development Clinic.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. And, so I'm Jonathan Liljeblad. I'm the convener for the Law and Development Clinic. You see right there, that's one of the pictures from this last cohort that went in 2024. Basically, the heart of the course is I take 14 students every year, and I embed them with various law and justice NGOs in Phnom Penh. So we are partnered with 6 different civil society organizations that are based in Phnom Penh that deal with issues like access to justice, human rights, democratization, gender equity, children's rights, community participation, and anti-corruption. So these kinds of topics. Oh, and also environmental issues as well. Usually there's about 2 ANU students per organization, with one organization taking 4 The entire model of the course is it's immersive. So the idea is that by having you go physically to Cambodia and actually staying in Phnom Penh for 6 weeks with these organizations, you're getting to see the totality of what it means to be engaged in social justice work in a developing country, particularly in a place like Cambodia. When I say embed, and when I use the term immersive, what it means is that you're working alongside the staff in these organizations. You're working beneath or under the supervision of a Cambodian supervisor. And so you're just basically treated as one member of their office, right? And you get to see the reality, the totality of their existence in terms of the kinds of issues they face. And through that, you get a much deeper understanding about what, the kinds of challenges that exist in trying to promote rule of law, human rights, and justice in a place that in a lot of ways doesn't have a functioning justice system and has severe problems with the rule of law. Out of that, hopefully you'll get a deeper or a better sense about what is the meaning of law and what are the assumptions that and privileges that you operate under in a place like Australia in terms of having a functional legal system. The other component of that too is that you get to sort of get a different perspective about, what does it mean to be a lawyer in another country, and particularly in a developing country that is still trying to work its way towards having a functional legal system. The only other thing I guess I can say is that you're not unsupervised, you're not totally free, you're with me. All of these organizations that I've worked with, all the work that you're doing is work that I've done in the past. You're basically getting a chance to see the kind of stuff that I have done and the stuff that I do. So I fall into that category of academic that's called scholactivism. I'm a scholar activist. So half of my time is in the office doing research and teaching and all that kind of stuff. And then the other half of the time, I'm actually working with a lot of aid organizations in other countries. The category, as you might imagine, is law and development. So it's basically trying to place you and expose you to a very different career path. So for anyone who has an interest in development work and trying to figure out what does it mean to be working in a developing country, what does it mean to be working in an aid program, this is very much the course where you get a direct contact with aid organizations. Law and development and those kinds of careers, they're sort of the top-down trajectory where you work with organizations like the UN or the World Bank. But then there's also the bottom-up trajectory where you were working with a lot of local aid organizations that are based on the ground and living in countries. And so I'm giving you an exposure to the latter. I'm getting, letting you see all of the various law and development aid workers that actually live in these countries and actually, have their entire careers in these countries. A lot of these kinds of careers, the organizations, they can't afford to do recruiting on a university campus, and they definitely can't afford recruiting missions, traveling to places like Australia. So the only way you can get access to these kinds of careers is to physically go to a country like Cambodia and physically meet the workers in these organizations. And so this is letting you get a head start in that direction. I'll finish off with the kinds of students that enjoy this course or the kinds of students that I recruit. In a place like Cambodia, everything is relationship driven because the stakes are so high in terms of the fact that, the highest rate of disappearances among lawyers in Southeast Asia is among human rights and environmental lawyers. So you are getting a lot of responsibility. Because the stakes are so high, I tend to prefer students who are very sensitive and very aware as to the magnitude of the risks that these lawyers are undertaking when they host you, right? And so I just want people who are sensitive to those kinds of issues, who have a sense of responsibility, but also above all have a high level of curiosity about an alternative career path. So for anyone who's ever wondered about, what's over the horizon, this is the course for you. And if you've ever wanted to think about a career that does not involve gray suits, gray offices, going to gray streets and gray cars based in Sydney or Melbourne, this is the course for you, right? So thanks. And then I'll hand it back to the International Law Clinic, which will be back to Vivien.
But being the director of clinics, I have to say, not many of the clinics involve grey suits, so I think you can choose anyone if you don't want to be in a grey suit. Yes, so Matthew Zagor, who's convening the International Law Clinic, couldn't be here today. Don Rothwell, sorry, is going to be convening next year, and you will probably all know that Don's a very well internationally respected international law scholar, with a lot of fantastic context, sorry. And that's relevant because what the clinic does is, I've thought on a piece of paper, but I can remember anyway. So first off, in the first half, I think, of the semester, there's a lot of work with students around what possible projects they might do. And sometimes students work in pairs or sometimes individually. So thinking about what projects you could do for an international organisation. So some of the clients are real. So one of the clients this time round was an Aboriginal group whose name, sorry, I've forgotten, but doing work on or Torres Strait Islander group actually, so the Torres Strait Island Treaty. And I know that in the past, Don had students doing work for an international organisation that was investigating war crimes in Ukraine. So those are the types of clients that the real clients are. And then there's also sometimes clients. So, you know, students will want to research and make a submission on X. And so although the international organisation might not be able to have you take them on as a client, you could still do the work with a view to researching. For example, some students are looking at the two-state solution this time around in the Middle East. So the first bit of the course, there's a lot of interaction with international law practitioners from the spectrum of government through to other types of international law practitioners, telling you what it's really like to work in this space. So that I'm sure is really, really interesting. And then the second part of the course, you're more working on your projects. And of course, you're working to the convener who's got expertise in international law. So yeah, a really interesting clinic if you're interested in international law issues. It is obviously virtual in the sense that if it is a real client, you most likely be interacting with them virtually. But nonetheless, an exciting opportunity.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you for sharing all about the clinics. At this time, we're going to invite up Ollie Zein, and he had participated with the Youth Law Clinic, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his experience.
So I'll probably first start off by saying the Youth Law Clinic was definitely one of the highlights I've done at uni. And I think that's probably because I found it quite refreshing to get out of a classroom. And I found that a bit more engaging. And in terms of highlights from the actual clinic, as cliched as it sounds, it was definitely the relationships I built. Because I think for me, at least, sometimes uni feels a bit impersonal. You know, you have these massive compulsory courses, online uni. I definitely hadn't really got to know any of my conveners, and I didn't make a huge amount of friends within tutes or classes. But I found in the Youth Law Clinic where you're with the same group for around 10 weeks, you spend 1 day a week together collaborating, you definitely got to know them really well. And you also got to know your supervisors and your course convener because you're working alongside them. In terms of challenges, I think the biggest challenge was probably the fact we were dealing with things that weren't just designed problems to test our knowledge. So we had to work with solicitors, and sometimes, we were learning alongside the solicitors. So, it's obviously a bit disconcerting when you ask the person who's in charge what the answer is and they go, I'm not 100% sure. But obviously that makes you feel like the work you're doing is more important and it's much more engaging to work that way. So obviously not having that security of being in a classroom can be a bit daunting sometimes, but it's definitely what makes it such a rewarding experience. Thinking about tips, if you are going to do the clinic, definitely to engage with the seminar materials. So I don't know if you've had it explained, but you have your 1 day a week at Legal Aid, and then you have a seminar. I think it's a 2-hour seminar weekly. And the seminar definitely touches on the more conceptual side of the work you're doing. So for instance, like one week we looked at different ideas or conceptions of what social justice lawyering is in itself. And if you engage with that, it really enriches your experience in the clinic because it's dealing with the conceptual stuff of what you're doing day to day. But also vice versa, the concepts that they're talking about, you've had some kind of experience with them because you've been working in the clinic. So I'll definitely say engage with the tutorial materials. I also recommend trying to incorporate your personal experience of the clinic into your assessments. This might be like the only course you do where you're going to get encouraged and rewarded for honestly reflecting on how you understood an experience, or how you understood your experience, how you felt, why you might have felt that way. Because obviously reflection is a big part of the whole process, and you don't really get to do that in other courses. And finally, I think if you're interested in a particular area of legal aid, you definitely have the opportunity to explore that alongside what you're doing at the Youth Law Centre. Everyone's very helpful and nice. So we definitely have the opportunity, if you were interested in a particular area of law, you could go and shadow that team for a day, or if you just wanted to meet people who work in that field and ask them what it's like, or you had questions, that was definitely an opportunity available. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend doing the Youth Law Clinic.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks. I truly appreciate your personal experience. I know that our team has benefited from receiving many student statements about how powerful all of these clinics have been. And that's the whole idea behind highlighting the clinics and highlighting the sort of human stories behind all of them, that students have had their lives changed. And it's been very powerful. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. All right, so before we get to the Q&A, I want to talk a little bit about some of the eligibility. Now, all of this goes in depth on the website, and so we don't want to get into all of the nuts and bolts. But I do want everyone to be aware that these are really for our Bachelor of Laws and Juris Doctor students, okay? And in terms of capstones and non-capstones, the International Law Clinic for undergrad students is a capstone project, meaning that it's more research-based. So that's just something to keep in mind. And for the Juris Doctor students, the clinics do count as that capstone project, okay? So just something to keep in mind. You'll make sure that you meet the course prerequisites, and those are on the website as well. But you'll see them on all the applications. Just take a good look at those. Of course, submit an application before the deadline. And importantly, we have created this postcard, and I'm hoping it's going to be really helpful to our students to get the information out about our clinics and internships, and has a QR code and some kind of general information. Usually these applications open up several months before the semester begins. And so we're finding that students either are not aware of the application dates or they're missing them, okay? I want you to know that semester 1 applications are open today, okay? So something to keep in mind, and they'll close on the 13th of October. Now, as far as law and development, that's a little bit of a different process, and law and development is a summer program. Okay, so this is for a summer semester. It's once a year, typically that's what we've been doing in summer. And those applications are also open now, but they close in September. And I have the date here. Oh, 15th of September, okay? So keep that in mind. Law and development is separate in that way in terms of when it runs. The clinics run semester 1 and semester 2, okay? I just want you to be aware of that. And again, thanking all the course conveners. There's been so much wonderful information shared, but we're going to open it up now for some questions. And I really hope you'll take advantage of having the course conveners here, the experts on the programs. Does anyone have a question here raise your hand, and if there's any questions online, Saskia will be managing those, okay? Any questions about how the course is run? Anything you're really excited about that you'd like to know a little bit more about? Anyone online, Saskia? Yeah. This is the good part, right? Oh, you know you have some questions, yeah? Okay. And that going once?
There's a question.
Oh.
There's several questions over here.
Do any of you have any recommendations for at what point in your degree you think it's the most beneficial to do these, or at what point it most suits beyond just having done the prerequisites?
Well, it's probably worth saying that we often give preference. If we've got more applicants than places, the general rule is to give preference to latter year students because that's their last opportunity. But if you get the opportunity to do it when you've done the prerequisites, I actually think that's a fabulous opportunity because it means it gives you a stronger sense of what law's like while you're finishing off the rest of your degree, which is a great position to be in my view. So I think as long as you've got enough, well, clearly you've got to do the prerequisites, but as long as you've got enough sort of solid courses under your belt so that, you know, I suppose about for the combined degree year 3 onwards, I've got a student into one of the mid-semester interviews today. The student was saying she's in year 3 and she was a bit concerned it was too early, but she's really appreciated because it's given her such an insight into how it works. So I'd say take the opportunity when it comes, basically.
Thank you. I think we had one more here. That person still have a question? No?
There's one here.
Sorry, I didn't know whether I was the only person. This is more for the Law and Development Clinic, I guess, but also all of them. Do you find that students, once they've completed the learning overseas, do they return back, or even at the clinics, do you find that there are students who have returned to these clinics and holiday them?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant they never come back to Australia.
Oh, no,
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 no, no, no.
You leave them there?
No, you come back to Australia. Let's want to be clear. Yeah, so in the case of the Law and Development Clinic, all of the students that I've had have said the same thing, that once they realize just how relationship driven things are, they really do get a very personal connection to people in the office. And I've had multiple students who I found out, they never told me, who I found out later, like had actually continued doing pro bono work for these organizations on their own time, just because they felt so strongly about it. I've actually had to rein students back in a little bit, just saying, you know, you have to graduate. But I mean, it's been immensely reassuring to me to see that students are actually committed to some of these. And once they realize, like, you know, what they're involved with, to them, they always tell me that they feel like there's unfinished business. And so, yeah, they continue on a lot of the times. Yeah.
Nothing like all of them come back, but I guess each year, I guess a handful we'd see again. And in Legal Aid ACT, they do regard the students that come into the Youth Law Centre as sort of auditioning for potential jobs on the helpline and various other places in the office. So if you're interested, if students, often they're not interested at all in legal aid until they actually wind up in the Youth Law Centre and they realise it's actually pretty interesting. And they are very interested in getting paid work in the organisation. And the organisation actually asks us for our views on who'd be best. And so we are sort of talent scouts. Yeah.
Do you want to say anything, Steph?
Yeah, definitely. I have found out sort of not directly that a number of students have continued to volunteer with the EDO. And often the EDO love the students that they get here. So that's quite nice to hear. In addition to that, we've recently started or created a new course called the Environmental Justice Practicum, where law students partner with fairness school students to work with environmental organisations on legal issues or environmental issues. And a number of my students from the clinic have either done both courses now or are attending to do both courses. So there's lots of opportunity to continue on your interest.
I should have said too, we are asked often for references for people who've been through,
Yeah.
including, I did one last week for Ali.
Yeah, I suppose the other thing to say is that I think all the clinics, but certainly Canberra Community Law, but all these organisations are interested in students, even if they don't end up working in the sector, having an understanding of it, because a lot of private law firms do pro bono work. So CCL has a lot of pro bono work done by private law firms, and the more clinic graduates who are in those firms or in government. I ran into a former student who's at AGS who's still who's doing his pro bono rotation back at CCL. The more understanding there is amongst the profession of the work that these organisations do, the better.
Thank you.
Oh, Saskia?
Yeah, I just have one question online for you, Jonathan, specifically about law and development. When will it run in summer? And also, how important is GPA in the application process?
In country, it's going from January 2nd until February 15. So we're flying out of Cambodia on February 15. So that's the 6 weeks in country. But then the assessments are due at the end of February. But then but before January, there's prep sessions. So because of the cultural transition and the legal transition that's involved, I do insist on some like 6 pre-trip sessions just to make sure everyone gets some foundation about what they're going to be doing. And then there's also an informal process where I actually have you talk to the previous students who did the trip because they can provide much more direct answers than I can. And also you can exchange contact info and just hang out and get some whatever students talk about whenever I'm not around. So there's that. What was the other question?
How important is GPA?
Oh, the GPA. It's important, but not dispositive. Okay, so I'll use that term. It's important, but not dispositive. And the case in point being that I've had some situations where I had really like the top tier students, but then when I talked to them, I just lost all confidence that they actually understood what they were actually going to do, and they actually understood the responsibilities that they were going to undertake. I'm very protective of the people that I work with in Cambodia because I'm putting their lives in your hands is really effectively what's going on, and I want to have some reassurance that you're not going to risk you're not playing with house money, to put it that way, right? Just use that term, that you're not making bets that they're going to have to cash. So I just, so I want, that's really what I'm trying to get at when I look at students and when they apply. Yeah, thanks.
A lot of you guys have been discussing how like previous students have then gone back to volunteer with each organisation. Is there opportunities even if you haven't done the clinic to volunteer at these sorts of places?
Certainly there is a Canberra Community Law. Yep.
Same with legal aid.
Yeah, I think it depends on the timing, but generally, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's even in Cambodia, the need is bottomless, right? When you're dealing with developing countries, the need is bottomless. So you can just show up and just volunteer on your own. It's just that it's difficult if you're an outsider to know who to talk to unless you've actually had a mediator introduce you. So that's the reason why this course is sort of facilitating that relationship building.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Jonathan, as well. In relation to the 5-6 weeks you spend in Cambodia, what's the kind of day-to-day looking like with that? Like how much do you spend working or kind of like informal working or free time? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just working like any other member of the staff in the office works, so, right? So they're going 9 to 5, 9 to 6, and midday lunch and that kind of stuff. You're living the same life they're living, right? Now I know that can be a little intensive, especially when there's a culture shock to deal with. So, you know, we do have debriefs on a regular basis, periodic basis as a group where all the students and I come together and just share experiences and talk through things. And you know, that's the reason why the reflection, all the clinics, by the way, this is the reason why the reflection is so important, because it's about trying to understand the positionality and sort of help you process what's happening to you just as much as processing what you're doing in terms of your tasks, and trying to help make sense of it, right? Because mentally and emotionally, there is quite a lot that happens once you step outside of a classroom. And so, you know, all the clinics are trying to help you work through that. And so, you know, when we're in country, the evenings, we do these debriefs. And in particular, I always make it a point that on Friday evening, we all sit down together and have a very deep discussion about and allow everyone to sort of vent, basically. Yeah, but we also have excursions on weekends just so people can just, you know, do whatever, just let loose for a little bit.
And following on that, Stephanie, would you mind, you mentioned something when we met about environmental law, about how you have a specialist come in and to kind of help process some of these. Are you comfortable saying something about that?
Yeah.
I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, so certainly in the last couple of years where some, I guess, issues have come up around, you know, environmental and climate grief, we encourage, you know, talking about it openly, and certainly we share resources. And in the past, we've had a psychologist for Psychology for a Safe Climate come in and talk about different ways to, you know, deal with climate grief, which is, you know, can come up from time to time. And so the point of that really is to, I guess, to maintain resilience and, you know, mental health, good mental health during the course, and also because the clinics are generally quite reflective, just ensuring that you have a way to process essentially. So, yeah.
Any other questions for our course conveners, for our student speaker, or for us?
Yeah. I guess this is just a question for the panel, but what makes an application sort of stand out? What are some things that you should be looking at including, or?
I think it's true for all, but certainly speaking for Canberra Community Law, an understanding of the values of the centre and a sort of, you know, demonstrating that you understand those values and you share them. So when I ask, going back to the GPA question, when I ask the solicitors down there, well, what's your criteria? They basically say students who are on board with us in our concern about the clients that we serve. So that's what matters to them. Yeah, but I'll let everyone else say what they think too.
Much the same, really. If people who basically they do a little video, but for about 1.5 minutes, I think. And secondly, they actually talk about what they can bring to the youth law clinic or youth law centre if they're selected. And basically, you look for something that's a bit exciting in there. But to be honest, the number of people that came out of the woodwork actually applying in the last couple of semesters was not very much greater than the number of positions available. So it wasn't all that hard to choose. But there are some that are more exciting than others.
I think for us, having an interest in the environment, so you don't need to have done environmental law or any environmental subjects, but having an interest and I guess showing that it's an interest that you're hoping to develop in the clinic is really important, because the topics that we engage with each week are so different. It really is an opportunity for you to focus on an area of law or environmental law that you're particularly interested in. So it's really that interest.
Yeah, so for me, I guess the way I'll phrase it is more about like the students who tend to be the most successful or tend to do the best. And, you know, one of the biggest complaints I've had from a lot of aid organizations is that they've gotten these wonderful candidates from, you know, the UK or US or, you know, Australia or wherever. And then the reality of doing law and development work is very different. I mean, is very different from the expectations of the romance of doing law and development work. And these students, after, you know, 1 week or 2 weeks, or in one situation, it was just 1 day, the individuals in question just say, the reality is not what I can't stand this. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm out of here. Right. So the churn rate is very high. And so what I've seen is that students who tend to do better tend to have qualities of, well, number one, curiosity. So that, you know, they have a genuine curiosity about something outside of Australia. And when I say outside of Australia, I mean outside of a first world luxury. Because, you know, you're living in a first world country and there are a lot of luxuries that you have here that don't exist in other countries. But so you want to have a genuine curiosity about life outside of that. Number two, resiliency. So the ability to adjust to, you know, the fact that suddenly things that you assume are going to work don't work. So electricity is not always available. Air conditioning, definitely not available. Water, you know, maybe it's available. You know, so these kinds of difficulties and dealing with those kinds of fluid circumstances. And then the third one, I think probably is just empathy. Is like, you know, can you actually understand why someone feels the way they do? You know, you may not agree with it. You don't have to agree with it. But can you at least understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they're thinking what they're thinking?
Oh, thank you again so much. Can we give our question meetings a round of applause? We're so appreciative of your expertise, your passion for our students, and we really want to thank you for coming tonight and just sharing your passion for these clinics.